Okay, we're missing a couple people. Why don't we go ahead and call this meeting to order? And we will, it's 6:33, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And we will do roll call. Councilor Madison?
Sergio is here.
Councilor Bradley? Here. Councilor Pagano? Here. Councilor Skinner?
Here.
All right, Councilor McGilvery is not here yet. And we have Commissioner Popoff?
Oh, present.
Commissioner Moore? Oh, hold on one second. Hello there.
Hello. I have been trying to
Uh-oh.
get in.
Uh-oh. What's happening?
I don't know.
Councilor McGilvery can't get in. Huh.
And both of them want password, like password, and
They want a password? Okay.
yeah, it's right there.
Can you try just clicking the link from the email?
I did.
Oh, okay.
I did. So I am on
Okay, we will unlock the door.
it. Okay.
Okay,
I will be there in a few minutes.
thank you.
Is she up front?
She'll be out front in a minute. She's driving down.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor McGilvery cannot get into the Zoom for some reason. So she is going to go on down. And I am going to rename Commissioner Martinez. Did I say, ask your name yet, sir? For you to say present?
I don't believe.
Okay, you want to say here? Thank you. And we still are missing Commissioner Chavante, and Commissioner Meyer said that she was not going to make it.
And I've not heard from Javante yet.
Okay. And I'm going to start, I don't see Anna Marie either. So I'm going to start by reminding everybody, including the Planning Commission, to do your statement of economic interest. You should have gotten an email from the state. If you don't fill those out, they're very mean about it and they charge you a fine. So please make sure you do that. It doesn't take that long. If you need help, let somebody know and we'll figure out how to get it done. Oh, we had the wrong email for Commissioner Martinez. I bet you didn't get one. The SEI forms? Maybe
I'll
emailed
ask
from the
Kim,
Yeah,
because she's the one that does it now.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. And is there any other housekeeping we need to do before Councilor McGilvery gets here? I see Mr. Cecil's here. Mr. Cecil, I want to ask you to unmute and ask you if you wanted to make a statement at any time, or if you're just here to observe.
Thank you, Mayor Kaufman. I'm just here to observe.
Okay, we're doing a workshop, and it's the kind of workshop where we get input, so I will ask you again when we're moving along.
Very good, thank you.
You bet. And I know Mr. Vieira wants to give input, so I don't have to ask. And that's good. All right. Is there anything else, any other announcements we want to do, Commissioner?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Then, Mr. Hasty, would you like to start your screen?
And I think if he's a panelist, he can share
Yes.
just as a panelist. Okay, room rater score to Sergio for the maps on the wall. Right on.
So it looks like I'm just trying to share my screen. It says disabled, host disabled participant screen sharing, so somebody might need to unmute.
Let's see. Where might that be? Ah, all panelists, got it.
There we go. Okay. One moment.
Between the two of us, we can figure it out.
Okay, can everybody see that
For those
on their
that
screen?
don't
Yes.
know, I will introduce Matt more officially. Matt Hasty is from MIG, did I do that right? Or MGI?
MIG.
MIG, and they are our consultant, paid for by the Department of Land Conservation and Development, to help us with our housing advancement project. And he presented last month, and he's going to continue this month. Take it
All
away,
right.
sir.
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody for having me again. I'm going to do just kind of a quick little bit of review, but I'll go through that quickly. Just kind of a reminder on kind of the purpose and objectives of this project, which are to create an actionable plan, facilitate housing development, and meet the community's housing needs now and in the future. And some of the more specific objectives to reduce housing production costs, provide for a more efficient land use permitting process, and facilitate a variety of housing choices that meet the needs of people in Gold Beach. Just kind of a quick reminder of the schedule we're on. We are kind of here, if you can see my cursor, early April. We're still in kind of the process of identifying strategies and starting to evaluate them, but we'll really get into that in more detail in this next task 3 here. And we'll be back in front of you several more times. I'll kind of talk about next steps in terms of council hearings at the end of my presentation. And so tonight, we're going to talk about the recommendations that were in the memo that was in your packet, and also just a few takeaways from a series of meetings that we had have been early to mid-March with kind of a variety of folks in Gold Beach who are have some role in housing development or providing housing services or are on the council. So I talked about some of that last time, but I'll do a quick kind of repeat on that tonight, and then walk through these initial recommendations. And I would say, you know, that's what they are. They're initial recommendations. We have not fleshed them out in a ton of detail, although you'll see a certain amount of detail around development standards and potential changes to those. And we'd love to get your comments. Is this making sense? Do you have concerns? You know, how should we move forward on this? Our next step will be to look at this all in more detail and come up with more specific recommendations. But we want to get your feedback tonight. And I would say just, I think Mayor Kaufman's going to kind of check in with people as we go through on this stuff. So I'll leave it to her to do that. So I'll just kind of jump in. So just kind of a recap on some of what we heard from these early engagement meetings, and we've pretty much finished conducting those. We ended up talking to 11 or 12 people as part of that process. Some of what we heard, need for more workforce housing. There's just not enough housing options in Gold Beach to meet the needs of people who work there and want to live there, or just to live there now and are looking for other housing. Need for some smaller units for smaller households. The land supply doesn't really match the zoning, so we'll talk about kind of what that means later in terms of some of the recommendations, but really kind of means that the zoning designations on the ground don't match the capacity of some of those properties for different types of housing. There's a lot of things that affect the high cost of housing there, the high cost of building materials, challenges with getting labor to build housing, and also, you know, there are some things in your code, your development code or zoning ordinance, that have an impact on being able to develop housing in different parts of Gold Beach. So we'll talk about that. We talked to people in those meetings about some of these initial strategies that we talked to you all about last time, and definitely heard support for allowing a wider range of types of housing in more parts of Gold Beach, and in streamlining the procedures that are required to go through the development and land use permitting process. And also just to note that other strategies are needed as well. There's other things that are needed to address some of the things that make it challenging to build housing that's affordable to people in kind of a wide range of incomes there. But that some of the zoning ordinance things will also be helpful. So when we talk about expanded housing options, we're kind of talking about a bunch of different types of housing. And these pictures are from housing and kind of around the state. Some of these are in Gold Beach. I think I could probably tell you which ones, but we've got, sort of traditional single-family detached homes, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, row houses kind of down in the lower right corner. These are some small-scale apartments. These are both the two lower right-hand photos are from the town of Yachats up the coast from y'all. And then what we call cottage cluster housing, which is kind of lower left photo, which are smaller housing units kind of clustered or oriented around a common open space or courtyard area. So those are the types of housing that communities tend to allow in different parts of their communities. So just to give you some reference when I talk about different types of housing. And I'm also going to try to pay attention to the chat, but hopefully Jody and Tammy will also be doing that to help me as I go through this. There's a couple of things that we wanted to talk about. We talked to you last time about a couple of alternatives for expanding the types of housing that can be developed, could be developed in Gold Beach in the future. One would be to essentially combine your existing designations, your 3R, your 2R, your 1R, consolidate that into essentially a single R zone. The other thing to do would be to retain those zoning designations or sort of create a new map and move the boundaries around and revise your procedures to allow for an expanded range of housing in each of those zones to some degree. But there would still be kind of a different mix allowed in each one. So we had a further discussion with you all last time. We've had a further discussion with staff and are recommending that first option, creating the new R zone. I'll say just a little bit more about kind of how that will be implemented in a moment in the next couple of slides. But just in terms of the rationale for that, I mentioned earlier that if you kind of look at your zoning map and see what is zone 3R, 2R, 1R, it doesn't necessarily match up with where more intensive types of housing can be built. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it's not super logical when you just look at a map and look at the conditions on the ground in Gold Beach. So that's kind of one rationale for this. Second is that it simplifies requirements quite a bit. You've got one R zone, and you don't have to kind of figure out exactly what you can build depending on where you are on the map. It lets really what's the conditions of the property and development conditions drive decisions about what can be developed where. Obviously provide some greater flexibility. And I've had a number of meetings like this or working on a number of projects like this around the state. And what I've heard in a lot of places, there's just some benefit for kind of mixing different types of housing in neighborhoods or areas that there are a number of benefits to that just from a sort of community perspective. And people just kind of seeing and having a variety of neighbors and housing types in their neighborhood. So those are that's some of the rationale. A little bit more about how this would work.
Matt,
So, yes,
you want to back up one?
Sure.
This might be a good place to pause and see if anybody has any thoughts. So
Yeah, generally.
I'm going to go in the order of our normal voting, which would start with Councilor Skinner, and then I'll go to Councilor McGilvery. We've just been reviewing what we did last month, Councilor McGilvery, and he just started introducing the rationale for the R zone. So after Councilor McGilvery, I'll go to Commissioner Popoff, Moore, Martinez, and then back to Madison, Bradley, and Gunn. So y'all know what order you're in. So I will start with Councilor Skinner. Do you have any questions or comments at this section?
And Matt, thank you for coming back to meet with us virtually. This is a great presentation so far. It's helpful. It sounds like you're going to come back to that timeline that you had there, so I'll save my questions for later. Thank you.
All right, Councilor McGilvery.
I have no questions right at this moment, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Popoff, or Commissioner Popoff.
I have no questions.
Commissioner Moore. me.
I have no questions, thank you. I'm enjoying this presentation.
Thank you. All right. Rebecca, did you have a question or a comment?
I did not.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Counselor Madison?
None, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Counselor Bradley?
None right now. We've got one from Matt maybe later, but I'd rather see the presentation because he might answer it right.
Okay. Counselor Bogano?
None, Madam Mayor.
All right. We're doing great. There was a question from Commissioner Ricks last month that I'll address. She had said that there had to have been a rhyme or reason to where our zoning and why it was there, and we could not find any rhyme or reason to why it is where it is. And so if we did, we would bring that forward, but we couldn't find any reasons. So I think it's just somebody threw darts on the wall and that's where it was. So, okay, Mr. Matt, would you please take over?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to just cover the next couple slides, then maybe we'll pause again and see if people have questions or comments. So this slide and the next one are kind of about the review procedures that you all would apply and administer to review different types of development. So first, this sort of framework, type 1, type 2, and type 3 decision-making framework is pretty common throughout the state of Oregon. You all don't really use this, you kind of use pieces of it, but you have specific review processes for specific types of development applications or decisions, but you don't use this type 1, type 2, type 3 kind of framework. So one of the things we would propose around the review framework would be to incorporate something like this and then use it in terms of how you would review different types of development applications. So this slide and the next one are related, so I'll kind of start out with this one, which is just kind of to describe what I mean when I say a type 1, a type 2, and a type 3 decision. So really, they have to do with the level of review and who the decision maker is, and what the notification looks like. It's kind of how much process do you go through for these different decisions. So for type 1 decision, the planning director is the decision maker. There's typically and so these are not necessarily exactly what we would propose in Gold Beach. We're going to have to do a little more kind of refinement of this. This is more kind of what's typically done, but we would propose something like this. So I'll say, details aren't all worked out, but this is what's typically done in other places. So appeal body is either none or the planning commission hears appeals on a type 1 decision. Notification is basically to the property owner or the applicant. You don't, for a type 1 decision, typically notify people within a given radius of a property where the development's proposed. And there aren't too many other requirements. Type 1 decisions are quite straightforward. They're essentially administrative decisions, and staff uses a set of clear and objective standards to make those decisions. Type 2 is a little more involved. The planning director is still typically the decision maker. These could be elevated at the planning commissioner's discretion or choice to the planning commission. And we would maybe want to identify some specific criteria or situations where that would typically happen. If it wasn't elevated, appeals would go to the planning commission. If it was elevated to the planning commission, appeals would go to the city council. Typically for type 2 decisions, there is a property owner notification in the area surrounding the proposed development, and that kind of varies in different communities between 250 and 500 feet. Generally, some kind of analyses of impacts are required. For instance, a traffic impact analysis often is required for projects that would be large enough to generate a certain number of trips and have an impact on roadways. So a little more involved in type 1, but still at an administrative level, unless planning director elevates it to planning commission. But in either case, you wouldn't require a public hearing. With a type 3 decision, those are generally made by a planning commission. In some communities, the decision maker is a hearings officer. We talked about that last time, that's something you could think about in the future, kind of have as an option. If you are short-staffed, that you would retain a hearings officer to make some of these decisions. These decisions are typically appealed to the city council, and property owners are notified within a specific distance, usually a larger distance than with a type 2 decision, so you kind of get greater notification for type 3 decisions, and the decisions are reviewed during a public hearings process. So you notify people, you conduct a public hearing, you take testimony. Almost always these kinds of decisions require a traffic impact analysis and potentially other analyses to evaluate different types of impacts of the development. But you still always have to be reviewing these based on a set of clear and objective standards and approval criteria. So that's kind of a little primer on what I mean when I talk about type 1, 2, and 3 decisions and generally how they would work. But there can be some tweaks, in the case of Gold Beach. Already, for instance, a lot of communities require notification through a newspaper or record. You guys don't do that. It's expensive, so we're not recommending that. It's not required by the state. But I got some good guidance on that from Tammy and Jody in terms of coming into this meeting. So you'll see some reference to that in the memo, but that's not something we recommend here. So in terms of this R zone and the types of review procedures, we're suggesting to review different types of housing developments. This is a pretty straightforward set of procedures. Sort of talk about flexibility or I guess simplicity. This would be one of the more simple or simplified sort of frameworks that I've seen in a lot of committees or a lot of communities around the state. So what we're suggesting, and these are all again initial suggestions of staff and the consulting team, type 1 decision or review process would apply to really any kind of residential development of 6 units or less, and really in this R zone, sort of all housing types would be allowed. But a type 1 decision would basically apply to small developments, 6 units or less of whatever type, also residential homes and accessory dwelling units. Type 2 decision, so additional notification and process would apply to essentially something larger than that, but smaller than 20 units total. So any housing type, but between 7 and 20 units. Type 3 decision would apply to multifamily developments more than 20 units, PUDs, and also developments that are located in natural hazard or natural resource areas. That was one of the questions we had at the last meeting was kind of, what about developments that are located in those kinds of areas? You have some standards that apply to developments in those areas. Another way to get at that would be to require they go through a type 3 review process. So that's kind of what's being proposed here. I see several comments in the chat, or that there are several comments in the chat. So I'm going to stop
Okay,
talking.
Madam Mayor, can you see the
and-
comments?
I can.
Okay, so I'm gonna I'll let you take it.
You want me to take it?
Or I can.
Why don't you take it?
Okay,
If you're
well-
going to be the best one to answer it.
One of our audience members, Mr. Coker, had said, to what extent can Matt explain the cost for implementing an R zone, the impact of property values in the impacted areas with the new R zone designation, and if not or not, he expects such zoning will invite investment. Now, what I had replied back to Mr. Coker would be that that's not necessarily going to be Matt. That's why we're having these meetings, and that's why the city's involved. We already do have a residential zone. We're not creating anything new. All we're doing is taking the 3 that we have, the 1, 2, 3, and again, that doesn't mean anything. We got 11 zones, and it's 1 to 11. 1, 2, 3 doesn't mean anything. Like, people always think it's like I can have 1 house, 2 houses, 3 houses. No, it's just a number that was arbitrarily assigned. So basically what we're doing is just trying to take the 3 zones, and as he has explained, they kind of contradict each other. It's like, let's just have 1 zone and these are the uses that can be allowed under certain types of development. So as far as like inviting more investment, I mean, obviously that's our hope. But the idea here is just to streamline things for people. So yeah, if somebody does want to come in, we can make things quicker and faster, but I can't speak to the impact of property values. I mean, the comprehensive plan designation of residential is not changing. There's the comprehensive plan designations, which is commercial, industrial, conservation, residential. That's not changing. It's just the streamlining it and trying to just make it where it's 1 zone instead of 3. And sorry, I'm probably going on.
I think the other thing that you didn't touch on is, there goes my brain, the residential zone is more limited by the topography and where it's located than it is based on the underlying zone. So if it's on a natural hazard zone in the floodplain, or somewhere that you can't put a lot of proper thing on because it doesn't have roads around it, or it's more restrained based on where it is and how it's developed than it is based on its underlying zone.
And that's not going to change. If you
So
have a
if-
property with steep slopes, that's not going to change.
If in theory 3R was supposed to be the one where you could put more multifamily in, it doesn't necessarily mean 3R is a better zone because it might be in a natural hazard area. So that's kind of there. Is this a good time to do another round robin, or?
I could say just a couple more quick things, maybe in
You got it.
response to the question. And I'm not sure if the question, when he asked about the cost, if that meant the cost to the city or the cost to property owners. I think this is not a big cost to the city. It's updating its zoning ordinance and its development code. And that would be done in large part as part of this process, which the city has a grant for through the state. So it will take a certain amount of city staff time, whatever we do, sort of whatever recommendations we implement that update your zoning ordinance is going to, take a certain amount of staff time. But the cost in terms of my work, et cetera, that cost is already kind of covered by the state to a degree. Potentially, whatever we do will require a certain amount of notice to property owners that this is going to be proposed, so there is a potential cost associated with that. I would mention that. I would say the other thing is that this will, in terms of, it's hard to say, and I don't have any kind of definitive answer about how this will impact property values. I would say in most cases it's going to increase property values because it's going to increase the ability to do more with your property, and it's not going to take away your ability anywhere really. This is going to provide additional ability and flexibility in certain parts of the city and keep things kind of the same in terms of what you can do in others. The last thing I would say is that one of the things we talked about last time is the fact that almost all housing development in Gold Beach now, other than a single-family detached home, requires a development applicant to go through a conditional use permit process. That is a more costly process than the types of processes that we laid out here. So it's going to reduce the cost for property owners or developers or a homeowner who wants to expand their home into a duplex or convert it to a duplex or something like that. It's going to save them money and time in terms of the development review process. So I would note that. Beyond that, I can't say exactly how it's going to impact any given property's value. So hopefully that's helpful, at least in addressing some of those questions. And yeah, I would love to kind of maybe take a quick pause here and see what people think of what I've talked about so far and what we're suggesting.
Okay, we'll start with Councilor Skinner.
Hi, there's so many good, interesting things you're sharing, and thank you in the chat for bringing up more conversation. I appreciate that, Mr. Coker. I'm looking at a question that I have, actually, two. One, backing up, I'm sorry, to the first round. In your community sessions, when you were having the listening sessions, did you say there were 12 people? I missed that number.
Yeah, I said I think it was 11. It was either 11 or 12.
All right. And then my next question was, I was curious to hear more about those community benefits. That's actually something I was thinking about going through my council packet, of having that intermix of different housing types. I know that we moved down here, and where I used to live, there was a little bit of that mix where you would have single family houses and duplexes and apartments kind of mixed together. And I was curious if that maybe was what Mr. Coker was talking about with property values, of how that might affect, instead of having all of one kind of house having different I just lost my words. Having that variety, whereas not all $500,000 houses, you have that mix and you have the different levels of housing types.
Yeah, I would-
And it seemed awesome, but I was curious to hear more about the benefits or where we could find out more information.
Yeah, I was referring to some conversations I've had both here, but on some other projects where we're looking at some kind of similar recommendations. And it was really just about having a wider variety of folks who are your neighbors, and sort of having different types of households, different sizes of households, different ages of households, different incomes of households, kind of in a given area, and just kind of expanding people's sense of what their community is by doing that. So that's kind of what I've been hearing from other folks in other communities, and some of the folks we talked to here as well, in the meetings we've had over the last month or so.
I can see that here in my own neighborhood in Gold Beach, how that would be beneficial for our community members that have more access to each other. Thank you, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Put on the record that Commissioner Chavante has joined us. It's about 7:04. And next up is Councilor McGilvery.
I have no comment right at the moment.
No comment? Okay, and then we'll go to Commissioner Popoff.
I'd just like to echo what Councilor Skinner said. I too would really appreciate seeing a variety of housing in the town. And it is interesting. I was wondering too about the impact to property values. So thank you for addressing that. And thank you, Councilor Skinner, for bringing that up.
Great. Commissioner Moore?
I don't have any questions. I'm actually pretty excited to see something like this go into effect. It'll certainly make building and developing a property much easier.
Thank you. Commissioner Martinez?
I'm very interested in possible benefits. It brings to mind certain segments of the town, closer to downtown. You can see large segments, 3 by 4 blocks, where one is forced to ask themselves, how many people could live here if we had different zoning? I'm thinking of many small patches of areas in town that, in a sense, could be more developed through these initiations. And I could definitely imagine certain benefits. Higher density living creates more foot traffic. That creates a little bit more of just people-powered movement. And that sort of activity, as far as I know, benefits the community. It's beneficial to enhance the experience of a person walking around town. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is very interesting.
Thank you, sir. And we'll go to Councilor Madison.
Nothing at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Bradley.
Nope, that actually answered the one question I had during that segment of his talk, so.
Okay. Councilor Pagano?
I don't really have any comments except I echo what Commissioner Moore had to say. I think it would be it's ideal for our community to do something like this, in my opinion.
Okay. And some of the other questions that came up, I do have a couple of the answers. I wrote them down while I was thinking of them. Long-term, the cost to the city will be a savings because it's going to be streamlined. And it also deals with some of our former annexation issues in zoning. It'll save developers some time, which in theory would be money because the application process will be more streamlined. For example, if they're putting in 3 units, it'll be a type 1 fairly quickly done compared to now. Is it fairly, depends on the zone, doesn't it?
And I should point out this because it's like, it isn't hard to develop in Gold Beach. I mean, in comparison, It's not. It's just, when we talk about streamlining, it's just, there's certain things that in most other areas, you don't have to go to the planning commission for it. And it's not that that's a hideous process, but it does make things take longer. Where if you can have something, like Matt was saying, the clear and objective standards where something can be just processed at the counter, then that helps the person, maybe start their project 30 to 45 days sooner than if they had to go through a public hearing process. And it doesn't short circuit the ability for people to participate because they still get notification on, depending on what type, like he was talking about the type 1, type 2, type 3. So there still allows input of the neighborhood, but it allows somebody that has a project that's pretty straightforward, it checks the boxes. If you meet these clear and objective standards, you can, go forth and build. So I just want to point that out. It's not that it's hard to develop in Gold Beach, but it's either, it's a staff decision or planning commission. There's nothing in between.
Right.
So.
And then I have a question for everybody to think about over the next month, and drive around town and look and see, are there any neighborhoods that are similar? Like in some cities you go in there and there's the old town where all the houses look the same, they're all built the same, they're all, like Rogue Hills was kind of that way at one time, but now it's changed. So just kind of that's not incidents, but just kind of think about that. Is there any large neighborhoods that haven't changed over time that should all be maintained like that? I can't think of anybody. I'll let you guys do that.
Okay,
And
just for the
then,
record, I'm
in
not.
the chat,
I'm not
there's a bunch of
Googling here.
questions.
I'm trying to get the thing to send to Mr. Coker.
Okay, is there anything in the chat that we need to do out loud?
He's just has questions about it, and I think that if he read the background documents, the ones that were done in 2019, I think that would answer a little bit more of the questions,
Yeah,
because
we
that's
need
more
to-
of the,
Yeah, and the 2019 study is on our website, correct?
yeah, and I'm trying to send a link to it.
Okay. And everybody wants to live in Gold Beach. We just can't fit everybody.
Okay.
And everybody needs a job, so, and not everybody has an income. Mr. Cecil said property values are positively impacted when sufficient housing exists as to house those without housing. No homeless on the streets is a positive. In addition, when workforce has housing, business thrives, and another positive for property values. That's a good point. So is this a good time for me to ask the participants if they want to speak? I will start with Mr. Vieira. If you want to give some input.
I haven't properly developed any of my questions for it, so I will withhold for now.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Cecil, did you want to speak now or just go with your comments?
Oh, I think my comments are sufficient at this time. I appreciate you reading those comments, Mayor.
You bet.
I think they're pertinent to the conversation, and I know there's always concern about property value when anybody looks at making changes to a city plan, so thank you for considering that.
Okay. And Mr. Pike, I think, is here for the next thing, which is probably about 20 to 30 minutes away. So if you want to leave and come back, I promise not to start without you, or you could just stick around and listen to us talk. And then we have a new caller that ends in 170. I'm going to push allow to talk if you wanted to say something. Move on. Oh,
Mayor, that caller may need help unmuting as they're on a telephone.
right. I pushed ask to unmute.
I think it sends
Star
you a
6.
message.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're
Hi
unmuted.
Tammy, this is Mary Rowe.
Hi, Mary. Do you have any comments?
I just want to say that I do think I love hearing everyone's positive attitude on this, and I do think that there are also some drawbacks, but I think that we have to do this, and because we have to do something, and I am so proud of Little Gold Beach for taking the lead with the housing crisis. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Did you want to have any questions or any other input?
No, that's all I had to say. I do think there are some drawbacks. I'm guessing that you guys already discussed those at other meetings, and whenever the population becomes more dense, there could be some, some problems, and there can be some conflicts between differing types of people, but there's no perfect solution to the housing crisis, so we've got to do something.
Thank you. All right, and then Lynn Coker. I asked you to unmute if you want to give some input.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I tried to telegraph to you vis-a-vis the texting, the important points that I wanted to raise this evening, but there are others. But just to summarize, I wanted to address, or have actually Matt and the council address, the issues of cost of implementing this kind of approach to zoning in terms of the infrastructure requirements when you go from a single-family residential neighborhood to multifamily to and/or whatever density that you eventually think is going to be important in order to have housing for the people that need it. There are infrastructure costs in terms of the streets, the sewers, the electricity, and it just goes on. And I don't see any yet conscientious reference to that in the information that's been provided publicly through the meetings that you've held. And admittedly, I'm new to the discussion, and if I'm not valid speaking to this point until after you indoctrinate me with the material that you got so far, so be it, just send it. The other is the value of the property as a result of this kind of zoning. You're looking at a major zoning change that will restructure neighborhoods that have been in place for over a century. And there is a massive amount of community trust, a massive amount of investment trust in that zoning. And when you go tinkering as a little city or a big city, when local government puts their finger on the scale, you are going to change the value. And the question to you, as you sit there, both as consultants, also as commissioners, and as council members, when local government puts their finger on the scale, are you going to make the value go up, or are you going to make the value go down? And there's nothing that you can base or predicate your decision on that's empirical. It's too new a notion in order for you to be able to make that choice rationally. And then finally, who wants to live in Gold Beach? You decide who's going to live there, and the money will follow. If you bring people to Gold Beach that have a little bit of money, then you're going to get people who don't want much money investing in our community. You bring people that want a lot of money as a result of coming to Gold Beach, it'll be a completely different community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have done a full round robin. And we can maybe ask Superintendent Udall for next meeting to just update us, but I think that our water and sewer is adequate and Coos Curtis Power is adequate, and I believe traffic is going to be addressed in this.
Yep. That's part of
But we'll make sure we...
the buildable lands is you have to have enough
is the buildable
sufficient
lands, right.
available land, and you have to have the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so, again, that's a question that can be addressed in the other document.
And I am thankful to be in Gold Beach where we have water and sewer that is state-of-the-art. Thank you, predecessors and Superintendent Udall. Okay, Mr. Matt, I think you're up again.
Okay, thank you. All right, I have, I think, kind of like 3 more slides to move on to this sort of second topic that we addressed in the memo that's related to this. And that would be some potential changes to development standards for specific types of housing in Gold Beach. And so I kind of tried to summarize them in this slide, just what are the types of changes generally that we're talking about. And then I have a couple of slides after this that repeat the information that was in the table in the sort of the second half of your memo that identifies what these development standards look like. And again, I'll say these are initial thoughts, and a lot of this came from Jody, Tammy, and Carolyn Johnson-Friedman, who's helping with the project. And so, we want to get your input on this. There's probably a fair bit of refinement that might be needed to this, but this is a good starting point to talk about this. So some of the types of changes generally that we're suggesting are reducing lot sizes, just generally. Again, because we're assuming one residential zone, there's a couple of ways we can go about this and a couple of things that we do here. One, you could apply different lot sizes to different housing types, or two, you can just apply kind of a minimum lot size across the board. Same thing with housing densities. We're proposing essentially overall a reduction in lot size, minimum lot size. Doesn't mean somebody couldn't build a house on a bigger lot, they could. We're proposing some both minimum densities, which you don't have now, but also applying maximum, increasing the allowable maximum density, reducing some of your setbacks and lot widths and depths to make these standards make sense, essentially, for different types of housing. If you have too wide a lot width, then you simply can't feasibly develop certain types of housing, like, for instance, a townhouse or a row house. Increasing allowable lot coverage, but that will vary by housing type. We'll talk about this in a minute. Reducing parking requirements for smaller units, not across the board, not for all units, but for smaller housing units, where the expectation is they're smaller households and fewer cars needed for smaller households. And then for manufactured home parks, primarily relying on state standards for those types of housing, but also we just need to do a little more refinement on that piece. So those are sort of some general, that's kind of where some of these standards I'm going to show on the next couple of slides would lead you to. So I'm just going to walk through each of these and then again stop. And other than next steps, these will be my last slide. So we'll do these next couple slides, stop and get your comments on this. And then after that, I'll just do a quick kind of next steps in the process. So this slide, it's got kind of the left column, well, left column's the standard, and then we've got, okay, what would be the standard for multi-unit dwellings? So that's duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, or apartments, essentially. What would be the standard for cottage clusters, essentially attached single-unit dwellings? And then what would be the standard for detached single-family homes or townhomes? So for all cases, the recommendation is to apply a minimum density standard of 10 units per acre and a maximum density standard of 25 units per acre. I had some discussion with, we have a team member who is with a firm called Johnson Economics. He's going to look at these standards in a little more detail, but his first sort of pass at these was that's a good idea in terms of making sure that development occurs at a density that makes more sense in terms of financial feasibility. So that was kind of his initial thought. Standards for minimum lot width would vary 40 feet for multifamily and for detached single dwellings, 20 feet for cottage clusters, condominiums. Minimum lot depth same for all housing types, 60 feet. A lot of your lots are probably deeper than that, so this sort of just gives some flexibility on the size the lot could be. Minimum lot size, basically a fairly small lot size for things like cottage clusters, but it's still a fairly small lot size for other types of dwellings too, at least in terms of the primary lot. So 2,400 square feet. Maximum lot coverage would vary from 65% to 85%. Building height, you would allow taller buildings for multi-unit dwellings up to 35 feet, 25 feet for the other two categories unless a garage is provided, because sometimes that's going to be a tuck-under garage, and so you'd allow a taller building height to accommodate that up to 35 feet, otherwise 25 feet. Off-street parking, basically, for smaller units of 600 square feet or less, one space per unit plus one space for every 4 units per guest, so that you've got a little additional parking for when people do have guests. And then for dwellings over 600 square feet, 2 spaces per unit. And that's basically what you require now is 2 spaces per unit for most housing types. Minimum setbacks, 10% of the lot depth or 10 feet for the front setback. Side setbacks, just use the International Residential Code for the first couple types of housing, and for detached single-unit dwellings, 10% of the lot width. Side street side setback, so side setback when you're on a corner lot, essentially that means 20% of the lot width or 10 feet, whichever is less, and then a minimum rear setback of 5 feet. So those, in most cases, reduce the existing setbacks you have or keep them essentially the same. So that's a lot to chew on. It was a lot for me to say, so thank you for your patience. And it's a lot to chew on, so I'm gonna stop and just see if y'all have questions, comments, reactions, kind of do another round robin, and then I'll just wrap up with next steps. And I know you have other things to get to on your agenda tonight, so I will stop talking for the moment.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Administrator Fritz.
Before you started the round robin, I just wanted to point out that the things that we're proposing here, we currently have a side and setbacks for side and rear 5 and 10 feet. So 10 feet from the front yard, 5 from the side and back. And then those maximum heights, those are currently what we have. So I don't want you to think that, you know, like we're creating something brand new. Some of this is stuff that it's already in the code. So some of the changes, the 2 spaces per dwelling unit, that's what we have currently. So some of these are not wholesale changes, it's stuff that's already there. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, some of these keep things the same, and others are reductions or changes.
Thank you. Okay, we will start with Councilor Skinner. Don't you love being on the hot seat tonight?
Hey, you guys know I could talk all the time. I wanted to just share, I think one of the benefits of having local government, having a variety on our city council, the variety of experiences. And I will say that in the chat, I did see some comments that caught my interest and experience as far as housing availability and types of housing and different socioeconomic levels. It sounded like that came up as well. There was information about, sorry, my glasses. There's information about workforce housing and increasing businesses. I will say as a teacher, we also are looking not only at businesses, but we're looking at housing our public servants as well. Not just workforce and businesses. I know, just case in point, we have a lot of housing issues up throughout Curry County, but here in Gold Beach, we have teachers living in temporary housing, in hotels. When we first moved to Gold Beach, our home had a studio apartment, and we ended up loaning that to somebody just till they found a place, and they never found a place. At their starting teacher salary, they weren't able to. So I am eager to see the opportunities this gives to help our teachers, particularly our teachers, that's my biggest experience level, help teachers find housing. And this is also a recruitment problem for our schools. Our schools have very high turnover and in staff. And part of that is housing. We actually had somebody take the science teacher position, accept the offer to teach science here in Gold Beach. And then when they went to find housing, they couldn't. And so they declined the actual opportunity. So I know it's a really complicated topic, but I thought that story tied to the conversation that was going on in the chat. And maybe not everybody on the council or the planning commission was aware of how stark that situation is for the teachers, which then of course directly affects our students and families. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor McGilvery.
Well, I think what I would add to Mrs. Skinner is simply that it's not just the teachers, that our medical staff, we're using medical staff because we can't house them. And I think we need to think in terms very seriously of how we're going to keep our infrastructure and how we're also going to build our community.
That's it. Thank you. I'll turn my paper back over. Commissioner Popoff.
Oh, well, speaking as a person who lives herself on a single income, you know, the opportunity of having a variety of housing options, some smaller homes, cottage clusters, condos, that kind of thing. I can't. Yes, I can't say more strongly than I am that this is necessary.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore.
I agree that it's very necessary. We do have problems housing our teachers, law enforcement, medical staff, etc. And there shouldn't be any reason for this.
Okay, Commissioner Martinez.
Speaking from my experience as a real estate agent, if it may address some of the concerns, that the impact of this could affect property values. All signs point towards property values being very healthy, in fact, perhaps too high. It's contributing to this housing crisis. In my office, in the real estate office here in Gold Beach, we regularly receive calls asking about rentals and what can we do to handle rentals. We hand them off to a property manager, and she is regularly just booked all out. I'm just echoing the refrain that housing is a problem here, and I just wish to offer that perspective that property values, they're awfully healthy at the moment. I understand that they can be volatile. Perhaps this is a chance to temper that volatility. And yes, anything that can perhaps support a family or anyone to live in this town and not have to resort to living out in the woods, that can live here and be able to walk or ride a bike anywhere they can because of the high density housing, then I think there is evidence to support that is a net benefit, a net positive for everyone involved, including the housing value. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you. Commissioner Chavante, would you like to chime in? Any questions, comments?
Sure, apologize for being late, had to work there. But what I see here is, it's, like I said, there's a whole lot of changes, and it just, with this whole approach, I think it's going to feel like a little bit more welcoming and accommodating to people who kind of fit in our unique small footprint we have here. And it would just seem to me we'd be possibly providing for more housing for it. Everybody said the workforce and the families and keeping people here. And I think one important factor in the comment coming up about housing values, if you don't have a workforce, you don't have jobs, you don't support businesses, you don't have the businesses, you don't have the health care, you don't have the health care staff. When I moved here, one of the first things I did was the hospital and check on that. So if you don't have those things will also negatively impact the value of the real estate too as well. So I like to see the direction it's going. And it's nice to have something set forth where we have a standard, set this all up, and we don't have to basically litigate every single property, making the discussion all the time so we have something done. And I think it's wise to do this now than try to catch up behind when we're, behind the eight ball, so to speak. Thank you very much. I appreciate the effort there.
Thank you. Did you need to pause the recording?
I didn't pause it.
Oh, it's paused.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
I wondered how long it was paused.
I don't know. And then
But we have Carl's video.
we will go to Councilor Madison. Do you have the little one too? Yeah, it's up there.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I maybe just want to tag on to what Commissioner
Popoff had mentioned in regards to what a nice feeling it would be for folks in our community to put the cost of the housing, you know, on the back burner and focus more on the physical accessibility of a structure, you know, the neighborhood culture and prioritizing what fits your lifestyle and even the ease of access to resources and amenities in the community. It's going to be a good day when the first priority isn't necessarily what it costs, but how it supplements your lifestyle. And that's all I have. Thanks again, Matt. This has been great work.
Thank you.
And Councilor Brett?
Matt, I really like the way you're going. Over the last couple of years thinking about it, as issues come up, one of the things that I have personally seen that I think is what we're building isn't fitting with the needs of the people we have living here. I really don't like calling it workforce housing. When I'm talking to people, I call them starter homes. Because people need we're not building stuff that young couples can start, put some money down, start building equity, build a family, and be able to use that. We're building homes that people who are already established, already have a nest egg, can come in and buy. And I struggled with ways that I thought that we could change that, and I think this might be part of that equation. I really like the way it's going. Yeah, that's what I got. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. And Councilor Pagano?
I agree with all the other councilor and commissioners' comments on this. I do want to say, with us adjusting or possibly lowering the square footage requirements on our lots, that is going to make some of the properties in town actually buildable at that time. So increasing property values for an unbuildable piece to now a buildable piece, it's a win-win. It gives the opportunity for more development, and it gives somebody that didn't have an opportunity to sell the property an opportunity to sell it.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Mayor, I had one other thought.
Councilor Bradley?
One of the things, Matt, I think might come up is just people being people. Citizens are probably going to know how this affects them as a property owner. If that's something that you can maybe think about, a question maybe for next month is, I'll use myself for an example, I'm not throwing one under the bus. I live in a small community, single family homes. If the city makes this changes, how is it going to affect me as a property owner? And I think a lot of our citizens may have that question as we go through this process. If you can think about it and come back with us for an answer or something like that next month.
Okay, thank you.
How many more slides?
Just one more.
Yeah, just one more.
Next steps.
Okay, so I'm going to mention on page 8 of our packet, Jody had some questions, Administrator Fritz, that we needed to chew on. So I will do, after we talked about this last night, we can chew on those and see if anybody has some thoughts. It's not definitive tonight, it's just thoughts.
That's all, yeah, just,
We're not making any decisions tonight. Tonight's just kind of brainstorming, getting the ideas out there. I can even put Jody up at the board if we need to. And just make sure we kind of have a good feel, and then as we go further with the public and get their input. we'll
and
start
also,
formulating
if you
decisions.
think of something, this process is gonna last through most of this year. So, you know, like a month from now, 2 months from now, you go, okay, that question about the how's it gonna impact, you know, maybe I have an idea about that. And so I don't want you to feel like, once we talk about it tonight, that there's not gonna be the option to talk about it again. So if something comes to mind later, you know, that's the purpose of having these joint workshops, is so that we can brainstorm. So, and as Tammy says on brainstorming, that there's no such thing as bad ideas during the brainstorm.
That's correct. And I'm an extrovert, I think out loud, and I know introverts are in this room and online, and you have to think it out first. So we respect both types. Okay, Mr. Matt, please take it away.
All right, so all I have really left in the presentation is just to talk about next steps. So again, you know, it was great to hear all your comments tonight, very much appreciated. Kind of our next step is to refine some of these preliminary ideas based on what we heard from you tonight, further discussion with staff, and then come back, review this further, review some updated recommendations in May. We had talked about potentially pursuing adoption of the city's updated comprehensive plan housing policies and then some of the supporting narrative for that in May. But I think, and I'm sorry to sort of say this during this meeting, but Tammy and Jody, we're probably going to need to do that in June. And the reason I say that is because I don't think we've sent out the 35-day notice we need to send out to the state prior to that adoption process. So if we get that out in the next few weeks, we could come back in June and adopt that. Tammy has something to say about that, I think, maybe.
Pretty sure Carolyn sent it.
Oh, hey, then we can do that. That's
Yeah,
great.
because we wanted to allow you
Is that
to
true?
work on the other stuff, Matt, and the stuff that was basically already, because the policy
Yeah.
amendments, those were done last time, so they just need to be
Yeah, yeah.
adopted.
Okay, so that went out, the 35-day notice?
Yeah, she's our
All
overachiever.
right, well, then May, well, that is what we would do. We can get a little bit, if we've made some substantive changes to what we've been talking about tonight, we can review those with you in May, but we would actually also be able to do the adoption hearing for the updated housing policies, which we talked about at the last meeting for your comprehensive plan and the supporting narrative. And it would also adopt the previous work that was done as essentially reference documents to your comp plan. So thank you. So that's awesome. I love being corrected if something can get done sooner. So that's great. And then subsequent to that, kind of over the next several months, we will be moving forward with actually drafting, implementing zoning ordinance amendments to do the things that we've been talking about tonight and at your last meeting. So the devil's in the details. I think I used that phrase last time. It's one of my work colleagues' favorite phrases to use when she talks about development codes and zoning ordinances. So we've got some time to work through the details on some of this stuff, and that would be our next step kind of after that May meeting, is to move through, have further discussion about this, and then ultimately to adopt some specific amendments to your zoning ordinance to make some of these things happen from a code standpoint. And also just to talk about any other strategies that we think might be important for the city to be thinking about, some of the things that were identified in the previous housing needs analysis. So we might have a little more discussion of those, but really the focus, a lot of this is on your zoning ordinance. So that's where we've been focusing up to this point. So that's it for me for next steps. And yeah, if people have questions about that, happy to answer them. And otherwise, I'm done.
Okay, I think it's been a really good meeting so far. And I would like to remind everybody, the more polite we are to each other, the more effective we are in getting our points across. So try not to attack each other and keep it positive. And it's okay to have a differing opinion, and it's okay to be okay with that. So there were a couple of the comments in the chat that I'm mentioning that too. So the 4 topics, 1, 2, 3, 4, that Administrator Fritz pointed out was parking, number per dwelling unit, increased fees based on dwelling size, garage, front yard, etc. Incentive increases to maximum height if garage is provided. And our consultant was recommending that it be 25 feet for certain types, but you can get 35 foot if you added a garage. So you might chime in and be thinking about whether or not you think that's a good idea. Are you comfortable with the maximum net density, knowing the challenging areas of our town? And Carolyn Johnson was like, you should have a landscape part of this. So do we want to discuss the landscape percentage for new construction, 10 or 20% or something that matters to us? And then of course, if we were going to do that, what would the definition of landscape be? And go from there. So I will do the round robin like I've been doing. And then when I'm done, I will call on the audience. And don't let me forget you, Chief White, because I forgot you last time. So we will start with Councilor Skinner.
Oh my. So that was so much information from everybody. I loved hearing everybody's opinions. Thank you for those who are attending this meeting, not as a council member or not as a commissioner, and choosing to be here and share your thoughts. I had a quick burst in my brain about the garages. It was an interesting idea on the height. Matt, I felt you had said maybe something a little different, that extended height would be if the garage was beneath like a townhouse, or could I build my regular house at 25 feet, just in the theoretical here, and if I added garage, like to the side, could I make my house 35 feet? Or was that 35 feet just for like a townhouse situation?
Wasn't just for a townhouse situation. I was just kind of noting that for those types of housing where we did identify that, in some cases, those could be townhouses, and it would help you to be able to put the garage underneath. So it wouldn't be limited to that. So you're right.
Well, it ties though into another point where we were talking about storage sheds, if not requiring garages. This idea of, you're talking a little bit about manners and polite, of keeping your stuff contained on your property, and someone in one of the meetings had said, well, maybe if we don't require garages, maybe we could require some sort of shed so people had a place to put their stuff, so it's not spilling out into the community necessarily. So maybe that garage incentive could also provide for that somehow. Landscaping, that sounds awesome. I know when we moved into our house, it was all about, yeah, we're gonna do the landscaping, and we didn't even build from scratch. And so I can imagine if that was part of the requirement, that it would get done. And if it wasn't part of the requirement, it would just keep getting pushed down and down and down and down, and we wouldn't have that. As we do a walkable community, it might not look as nice as it could. So that's the garage, that's the landscaping. What were the other two? Could you help me out, Mayor Kaufman?
Parking,
Parking?
right now it's two per dwelling period everywhere. And they're suggesting a lower number.
And that was one that we were talking about in the previous meeting, about how transportation looks different here than in some more high-density urban areas where we don't have a robust public transit system. And we have one, but it's still growing. So that one still makes me hesitate a little bit, because even a couple sharing a single small apartment, they might need both their vehicles depending on where they work. And we had looked at that report of where people are coming and going. So the parking one is a concern for me, on limiting that to one, even for smaller dwellings. Yes, transportation can evolve, but thank you, Mr. Dussel, but maybe not quite fast enough at this stage. And then the last one, Mayor Kaufman?
I don't necessarily understand this one. Comfortable with maximum net density, knowing the challenging areas of our town.
I think it was
That
just,
one I was trying to figure out when I was going over my board packet. Planner, can someone provide more information on that?
it was just that the maximum density, I want to say just off the top of my head, because we took the thing down, but I want to say it was 10, was 10 and 25, right, Matt?
Minimum was 10, maximum was 25.
Yeah, and basically
Correct.
that was, does that feel comfortable? I mean, does that sound like, because when I say challenging, it's like, okay, we have a lot of, like, for instance, in the area where you live, there's pretty steep slopes up there. And so it's not so much that, does that seem like it's comfortable for the area that we have and the challenges that we have? And as Mayor Kaufman said, a developer is going to be limited by the on-site, the specifics of the on-site. So it could be that, if it's near the river, it's going to be in the floodplain. If it's on steep slopes, you're not going to be able to get, maybe the maximum density of the zone is 25 per acre, but realistically, the density is going to be dependent on what the topography and other things are. So I just wanted to know, like Matt had mentioned that the economics guy looked at it and said, yeah, that's usually how it pencils out for developers. But I was just looking at it more from like a community perspective. Does that feel comfortable? Does that feel too much? Does that feel not enough? So that was what, like I was saying, we were what-ifing these questions. They didn't really get answered. It was just more like, does that seem reasonable? So.
Yeah, so I think I still would need more time to contemplate that, though it did bring me to another thought I had in my notebook when I was looking things over, is that some of our limitations that we have when we're trying to work on the affordable housing piece, but I will say we're not just talking about affordable housing for people just starting out. There's a chunk of housing missing for people looking to buy $300,000-$400,000 houses that are, experienced professionals, not new to starting out. So we're not just looking at completely starting out, someone had mentioned the housing for people starting out, like a teacher starting out at 35, even a superintendent maybe starting out at 85 or 100, they're having trouble finding properties. So one of the issues that comes in the community with the geography that you guys are mentioning is on my home here up on Tomcat, we had a lot that was subdivided, but the person's only able to build on it because they have the finances to build something unique. They have something that it's harder, it costs more to build in these areas. That I think Mayor Kaufman was referring to some of these areas with the steep slopes or having the flood insurance or all that kind of stuff. So something to consider, but as far as the net thing, I don't have a great enough picture in my mind of what that looks like. I hope my comments were somewhat clear. Feel free to ask questions if they weren't.
Thank you. Okay, uh-oh, I turned my paper over, now I don't remember anything. Councilor McGilvery.
Okay. I'm also looking at the density. And I'm thinking that developers get these ideas in their heads, but they don't live here. And they're not looking at our steep slopes, and they're not looking at our floodplains, and they're not looking at land that could erode. And so I think perhaps that we need to seriously consider our own topography and not worry so much about what other developers might be thinking.
I want to say, when you're done, Counselor, I want to say just a couple words about the density, just from my perspective, but I want to interrupt you. So
Oh, that's
right.
okay, please go ahead.
Well, I would say you're right, that developers won't be able to achieve some of those densities on some of those steep slopes, and I think that's okay. I think the reality, though, is that if you think that you need some, let's say, apartments built to meet certain people's housing needs in Old Beach, it's very difficult to build apartments at much below 25 units per acre and make that financially feasible. So if your maximum density is somewhere between 16 and 20 units an acre, let's say, you simply won't get apartments. They will not be built. So I think that's the reason for bumping up the maximum density, but I think you're all very correct in saying that, yeah, on some of those steep slopes in those areas, it's more the topography and the land that's going to drive what's going to get built, and you simply won't see those kind of densities on those sites. It will just be too expensive to build that form of housing on those sites at those densities. So I think that's sort of the reality. But if you don't have a maximum that allows for something that's financially feasible in the areas where it can occur, then you won't get it anywhere. And so that's sort of the point of having something, a maximum density that's something at 25, or in a lot of cities it's even higher, frankly. But that's at least a kind of something that's reasonable, I think, for a smaller community, in terms of not being too jarring a density in comparison to what's there now. But I would be hesitant to go much lower with the maximum density, because it'll just exclude certain types of housing. So that's what I would say about that, just from that point of view.
Good point, thank you. Thank you, you're right, I hadn't thought about parkings. My concern about decreasing the number of vehicles per family, I think we have to realize that people have to commute if they're going to work around here, and that we really can't limit people to one vehicle in a family. I think we may have to go up. Landscaping is an expensive project. As one who's had to do some of it. And I think if we made, I'm not sure what they mean by landscape percentages and what that means for the landowner moving into a new home. And so I think I'd like to know more about that.
I'll address that really briefly too. It would be a minimum % of the site that needs to be landscaped, and you can define landscaping in different ways and kind of what that means. It wouldn't affect somebody who's just moving into a house, like it would be basically for any new housing that's built.
Well, I realized it was new housing, but I wondered.
Sure, okay.
Yeah, Again,
And
it's an expensive proposition. Okay.
Yeah, it just depends on what kind of landscaping they're providing, really. I mean,
Right.
I think it depends, but it would be a percent of the site. 10%, 15% are pretty standard percentages used in other communities. So
Okay.
I think it's, do you want to do that or not? I think the question is, I think you could add some costs, certainly, not a ton, but some. And the question is, so how are you going to enforce it, you know? And I think that's one of the questions city staff has, is just being able to enforce that landscaping
So, yeah,
percentage.
do we have the yard beautification police coming around and checking you out?
Right.
I don't know. I know. That's being perfectly silly, but, you know, the question of what landscaping and how much is a question.
Thank you. Commissioner Popoff.
No questions or comments at this time, except to just thank you, Matt, for sharing again.
Any thoughts on the parking?
Well, I agree with the other comments made on the parking, in that I don't think it's reasonable to expect a family home to, or an apartment to only have one available parking space.
Landscaping?
Landscaping, I suppose, my question, at first I wasn't too clear on that as far as, is this is applying to new dwellings, and is this applying to the contractor, like what landscaping is placed by the contractor with, you know, during the building process, or after somebody has moved in?
I believe the suggestion was that a percentage would be landscaped before they sold it,
Okay,
or as they sold it. And-
Okay.
And then we would have to define what that is. Does it have to be green?
yeah.
Can it be rocks? You call it the Arizona look.
Because I personally, as
Your
Judy,
neighborhood,
the
you got
person,
everything.
I
But
don't
they're all
like
landscaped.
vegetation. I don't, because I don't like to work outside. So I think lava rocks are great.
And a lot of my neighbors feel exactly the same way.
You know, and I think that there's a percentage of citizens that also feel that way. I mean, it's great if you want to landscape your yard, but I don't like the idea of telling somebody they have to landscape their yard.
Exactly.
But then Carolyn, our other person that's helping with this, she made the suggestion, it's like, well, it doesn't have to be that. It can be like a water feature or something like that. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we can do something like that. You know, it's like, but I don't want to be the veggie police.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't want somebody coming and telling me I must put a water feature on my property either, you know. No.
Yeah.
We'll just give it some thought.
No.
Okay, and next is Commissioner Moore.
So the parking, I also agree that I don't think we should limit it to one, but I also think that we should take into account that there are several homes, even with 2 adults, that share a vehicle, and not all families of a single parent have, you know, driving age children. That's just something also to think about. The landscaping, I don't have any, I'm not real great on that idea. I think it just takes up usable parking space or living space. Obviously, the property should be neat and tidy, and I don't think that there should be a mandate for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Martinez.
The parking issue is definitely an issue. Perhaps, though, there are ways to address that may come as a result of, that may not have much to do with this specific conversation right now. It brings to mind the road diet that has been created in Port Orford, where there's now more parking along the main street. So if we did build a higher density apartment building right on the main street, and then implemented a road diet, we may be able to ease some of that competition for parking between businesses and residences. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Shabante.
Yes, okay, well, as far as the max density thing, we set that size where we have our max density, and then the topography will take care of the rest. It's just, you know, you're not gonna say, yeah, well, I have a 300 square foot place, I'm gonna put 30 people. No, it's gonna take care of itself, so do that. The parking thing is like, we're talking about, I heard the word limited. I don't think it's limited or must have at least provide spaces. Because you definitely can't limit it, because if you look at it, we have, most families will have 2 cars, then you get a teenager, they'll have a car, and maybe if somebody's lucky enough to have a boat, so you're looking at, there's 4 vehicles right there. So you got that. So it's something to consider about it. And with this whole thing too, is I like to see more and keep an open mind. If you're going to mention landscaping, you're talking to somebody who grows 12,000 gallons. So on a little space. So yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice if it's not a concrete jungle. But then again, landscaping in Arizona looks a lot different than landscaping in northern Washington. So you can still do things. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a forest and an acre of goat farming to go on it. So yeah, I think there's options that we can definitely do, get it done, and maybe focus on, instead of maybe looking at it, softening the look as a landscape thing. And so how do you limit that? So that's what will be the thing. But other than that, it's good, and liking whatever that I'm hearing from everybody, so I think it's really involved in it. That was great.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Madison.
I have nothing, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Bradley.
I think we need to be open-minded, because parking, depending upon where we are in the city, is going to be different. If a development's on the highway, on 6th Street, on 4th Street, we may want to have them have to have more parking, because street side parking isn't going to be available. Where they're away from those areas, we should be able to allow them to look at on-street parking as part of what's going on in that development. And I think we just need to be open-minded about what the topography is. And landscaping, kind of the same thing. If someone happens to build a 20-unit apartment, they're going to have a lot more concrete, because they're going to need a lot more parking. So to set something really definitive, I think we just need to be open-minded on what is being built and go with what feels natural for that project.
Okay. Sorry, Councilor Pagano.
I knew you were going to forget about me.
No, I wasn't. I
forgot
just
all
lost
the
my
comments
place.
I was going to say. I hate going last.
Oh.
So with the building height thing, I think we should be at 35 feet regardless. I don't think it should matter if there's a garage underneath. I think it should be 35 feet. You can build whatever. If you put a garage underneath, good for you. If not, then you've got an extra living space. Parking, I don't really have anything to say on that. Landscaping, I understand, but I don't really have a comment on it. And the 10 to 25 seems reasonable, and like Commissioner Trafante had said, it's going to work itself out based on the topography. It is what it is. You're not going to be able to put more than you can on there.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. Matt, I wrote a couple notes on the 10 dwelling units per acre minimum. I think we have to remember in the code when you do the draft that we have to have exceptions, of course, for topography, but also for septic and well. Because in Hunter Creek, they don't all have water and sewer. So you're not going to get 10 per acre when you have to provide a septic and a well, most likely. Once you did a community one, you might. Something to think about.
Yeah, yep, makes sense.
Yeah.
I would also go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to make one clarifying thing maybe about parking, which is just that when we're talking about off-street parking requirements, we're not talking about limiting how much parking somebody can provide. People can always provide more parking if that's what they think is needed for their development or for their home. What we're talking about is not requiring more than a certain amount of, or requiring more than a certain number of parking spaces for a given development. So I totally hear what people are saying about the need for parking in a community like Gold Beach where people are commuting, where most families probably do have, or households, not all, but a lot of them have 2 cars. So it's really about what you require as part of development versus, what somebody can do, and they can always do more. So I just wanted to note that, just to make sure that was clear. So sorry to interrupt there.
Thank you.
Did Councilor Pagano, oh no, it's just your background's flashing, sorry.
Oh.
I wasn't sure if that was your hand or not.
And I missed you the first time, so I'm going to make sure I catch you this time, Chief White.
I will add that as the parking police,
Literally.
I would like to maintain the current at minimum 2 parking spots per unit, just because of the amount of cohabitating between people with the housing situation. We have a lot of house guests that stay extended, roommates and adult children that return, and we have some homes that have 1 off-street parking space and 5 cars. So we play hopscotch regularly. They know me well. But I would say as a rule, that's more common than not, especially with the apartment buildings that we have, that it doesn't take very many friends coming over before the police don't have a place to park. So I'll say that on a bright side, I am getting an inspection on yet another foundation tomorrow to pour concrete. So we have more housing coming. And landscaping, I just turn my grass over with the excavator whenever it gets too long. So I'm not the best person to do that, but I understand it. And as soon as the water main project's complete, I know some of us are going to get more landscaping done. But it's about being tasteful. Everything that we're doing in construction, if we do it tastefully, we're going to increase property values and maintain more support within the community. So hopefully our builders have that in mind.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to the audience now, and at the top is Mary. I'm going to hit ask to unmute, and I believe it's *6 on your phone.
Can you hear me, Tammy?
You did it. Good job.
Have to do it about 3 times. So some of my comments have more to do with the last round robin where we didn't speak. I hope that's okay. I have 3 comments very briefly. First thing is I heard a lot of mention of workforce housing, and I just want to say that please don't forget about the need for senior housing. Our waiting lists for senior housing are literally 2 to 3 times as long, I did the research, as they are for other housing. And so please don't forget about, the need for seniors. And also, with respect to the density of housing, there's a couple things that occur to me. Things will change in terms of when people, I lived in a 4-plex just down the street from the city hall, and we were real close to other homes, and there were a couple things that taught me. One, of course, was about parking, and I agree with other people that there need to be 2 spaces, and of course, some people can park on the street. But one thing is, this may not sound like a big deal, but it actually, it turned into be a big deal. When you put a lot of houses or housing units close together, certain things which, it changes some things I think that people can do. One of them is motion detector lights. Those of us who lived in the 4-plex, our neighbor behind us had motion detector lights. And every time we rolled over in bed, literally, all of us in the 4-plex, their motion detector lights went on. It drove us, crazy. So that's one thing to consider. And then another thing is burn barrels. I know you know that's my favorite topic, Tammy.
I do.
And I think that this will change. I think that this should change the burn barrel ordinance. I mean, Brookings doesn't allow burn barrels anymore, nor does Port Orford. And if you're going to have a lot of dwellings close together with a lot of people with asthma and COPD and chemical sensitivities and heart conditions and so forth, I think you're really going to have to alter the burn barrel ordinance so that at least when there is, there might be some people who still live on a big piece of property and aren't close to their neighbors, but for pieces of property where there will be more dense housing, I think that this is more of a consideration now. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, next down on my list is Mr. Vieira. I'll ask you to unmute.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quickly, for parking, I've seen other towns have kind of addressed their parking issues in tying in with their setback requirements. And it's something I experienced over on 6th Street, which was a decision to push the home back to the 25-foot mark. And that's a little far for some of the stuff, but it provided just an open space pull up to the property that allowed for parking. And I can tell you now that they've got an RV park next to the home, a boat, and 2 cars. So without using any of the real side space, which would alleviate any issues with lot widths, lot depth becomes an issue in that front, but that kind of alleviates some of those issues without putting a garage in there. And then tying back around 2 garages, previously you guys had spoken on limitations, and would that be something to require for folks that have a tendency to allow their collection to become the public's viewing platform, to put it nicely. And those folks are going to probably experience similarly an issue where they're not going to add those things to future endeavors. And by making that a requirement, recently a contractor bid in our area came down to just over 45 grand for a 2-car garage. And that's a large number for that. And that's the going rate. Materials fall under that platform. But developers are going to be looking at what they're doing, and they're making their decisions at a risk assessment level. So they're looking to make a certain percentage off of this development that they're doing, because they don't know, as Commissioner Martinez mentioned, how volatile the market's going to choose to be that day. And developing a home is not always the fastest measure. And so that thing can change so quickly on them that when you're developing something, you have to keep in your mind's eye that if it's going to take a drastic turn, am I going to lose money on this decision? Because at the end of the day, they're working off their own capital. And so they're taking larger risks. That's why, when you borrow money from the bank, the riskier your decision is, the more interest they end up choosing to have you pay. And after that, the only other part would be landscaping. Requirements for those things, you fall into tree types. I think we probably have experienced this as a city just on the degree of tree decisions for around the benches. How are those going to affect things that are underground there, sidewalks, etc. We've seen places in our area that have hedges that it inundates into the sewer lines and causes issues on that front, which become costly to no end. So instead of landscaping, maybe taking advantage of our already outstanding desire for erosion control, which you would see as just sod or packed gravels, things like that, and tying in with other jurisdictions like the building department for a quick planning sign-off to say, hey, before they get the C of O, we want to see that their yard space has been duly taken care of, and there's not piles of dirt still floating about, that things have been covered and taken care of. I know the city of Brookings does do some of that. I would venture to say that the building official would be happy to work with the city on that front. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is Lynn Coker.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for the opportunity to talk tonight. I'm so grateful to be a part of the exercise and the quality of transparency in the exercise to review something so important. So again, thank you very much. Regarding the notion of walkability, as I look at Gold Beach, walkability as a design factor in enhancing our community, I think is a false hope. My experience is if you're under 15, you'll get out and from time to time you'll walk up and down these hills. If you're 30 years old, you almost never get out and walk up and down these hills. If you're over 40, absolutely not, and it's not good for your health unless you're trained to do so. So I'm thinking that we need to kind of scratch the notion of a broad-based concept of walkability as a design factor in broad-based zoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Cecil, you even have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor, for the recognition. I'll make it as brief as I possibly can. I really appreciate all of you taking the time to undergo this study. I think it's really crucial. Having been a small-scale developer on the steep streets of San Francisco, California, nothing is impossible to build on, but will the market bear the cost of the engineering? So always something to consider. I just want to hit on the landscaping issue. Landscaping does not equal plants, necessarily. We need to be really aware of the fact that when you cover surfaces in concrete, you have no place to mitigate your drainage from rainwater. It overtaxes our infrastructure systems, specifically our wastewater systems. So we need to look at keeping some open soil where we can percolate moisture into the ground. It also helps to avoid erosion in the long term. Obviously, plants are better at retaining soil in the condition of erosion. But it's just that whole idea of where to go with floods. I watched that in many cities where I've lived, that there's so much concrete, when you have a heavy downpour like we have on the coast here, you can have a couple inches of water on the road and lots of car accidents and even water inundating people's homes at the street level. So just something to keep in mind when it comes to landscaping. I believe it's a building code or a building department issue when it comes, or a planning department issue when it comes to your building plans. Zoning wouldn't specifically be calling that out, but it may be something you would put in your zoning codes. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you again for letting me interject in your meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate the input. Which reminds me, does parking have to be paved in our code now?
I want to say yes, but I would have to pull it out.
I wonder if that might be a way to get around where a happy medium is to make it crowded.
We try to encourage people to use pervious surfaces. The whole idea is just to keep your water on your property, so if there's ways that we can do that. It used to be back in the day, everybody liked concrete and asphalt, but now we've discovered, just like what Mr. Cecil said, that it causes problems in other areas.
If I may, Mayor Kaufman?
Sure.
On that issue, I've seen in some jurisdictions where I've lived, some municipalities, actual treads of concrete for your car to drive on. The grass in between. There are also some masonry type products that will sit down at the ground level in which grass will grow, but will also support your vehicle using that as a driveway or a patio area. So I'll just leave you with that. Thank you.
Yeah. 3/4 minus works really good for planting grass on and you don't sink. And then I wanted to mention, before we lost all our audience, because I know you're all going to leave really quick, I have been beating the bushes trying to get people with vacant land to build, and I've gotten 2 successes, and poor administrator, I keep calling her, what's this one zone? What's this one zone? So I finally have 2 interested. One will be affordable, which might tie into Ms. Rowe's concept of senior housing. So, I mean, they're just concepts right now, but at least I got some responses, so I'm hopeful. So With that, was there anything else, Mr. Hasty, on this administrator?
None for me tonight.
Okay, then we will close this part, and the planning commission may leave if you want. You're always welcome to stay. And we're going to take a 15-minute or 10-minute break, and so we will be back 8:30.
Start
Things
the
around
video
mine.
recording again, because it's just easier.
I'm right in the middle of town, I can only see my neighbor's roof.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Is everybody back?
Speak at once.
Yeah.
Let's see, I need to make sure Counselor Pagano, Skinner, and Madison are back.
Here.
Thank you.
Madison here.
Thank you. Counselor Skinner? Are you back? Mr. Pike, are you here? There's Counselor Skinner.
I am.
Okay, well, just stay unmuted for a second. So, let's see, next up is our consent calendar. Was there any discussion on that? If not, can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Motion from Councilor McGilvery to approve the consent calendar. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, and I will call for the question. I have to turn my Counselor Skinner.
You guys move super fast. No, I think I had some questions on a learning curve on the packet, but they do not need to be addressed here.
Okay, so,
Aye.
aye, thank you.
Sorry.
Counselor McGilvery.
Aye.
Counselor Madison.
Aye.
Counselor Bradley.
Aye.
Counselor Pagano.
Aye.
Thank you. Consent calendar passes. I'm going to move on to the public hearing. It is 8:30, and I'll open the public hearing for Curry Transfer Recycling and the rate review, and I will let Mr. Pike start.
Good evening. My name is Luke Pike, the district manager of Curry Transfer and Recycling. Excuse me. I'm here today to looking at our annual rate adjustment. We take back the CPI for the previous year, and that came in at 4.7%. So we were asking for a 4.7% increase. The most popular size cart there in the city is a 32 gallon, and that would constrain to $1.29 per month. And basically, it's just to help mitigate increased costs that we're seeing. Everything's. I know you guys know. Everybody knows that everything's going up. This is kind of a large increase for us. We're usually, we're down from like the 1.2s or 1.5, so 4.7. I've been here for 6 years now. I think this is the highest increase that I've been in front of you asking for. Just a little bit, kind of an update a little bit on the year. Very obviously a difficult year, with everything going on. But I feel, really proud for our team that we battled through having 9 people out at one time. And, we never missed a trash day, and we never missed anything. We kept the wheels turning, kept everything getting picked up. So I'm really proud of everybody. One thing I know we are asking for a price increase, but one thing that was brought up in the city of Brookings, and also brought it up at the county was, I know that it doesn't maybe affect, the city residents in Gold Beach, but they could bring it out to our transfer station is our yard debris. We are gonna add a 3rd week of free yard debris drop off. So I know somebody mentioned earlier about, burn barrels and things like that. So maybe adding a 3rd week of, customers to just come out to Mesika Beach and drop it off for free. That might help that as well. So I'm leaving it open for any questions that anybody might have.
We will start with Counselor Skinner.
In the meeting materials, thank you for coming in to present tonight, and that's great news about the extended free yard waste day, or week, that's great. My question was, in the packet, did I see that there was a year where there was no increase made?
Yeah, we did not increase in 2020 when COVID originally hit.
So we might theoretically look at it as a 2.35% increase, just 2 years at once, or is that completely off, like, way to look at it?
No, we didn't go back to that. It's just we take the average from January to December.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, Counselor McGilvery.
Okay, so what is?
Make sure you speak up.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking, I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to formulate this. I'm just wondering, what is the actual increase in cost to you to deliver or to perform your very necessary and very well appreciated job? Exactly what is that increase, and does it really justify 4.7?
Well, I would say, I mean, off the top of the cuff, I probably don't have the exact answer for that. I will say that the majority of what increases that we are seeing are well above 4.7. Just for a kind of a comparison, if you look at like steel, we have to buy new carts and new containers every year to maintain. Metal is almost 200 to 300% higher than it was prior year. A 6-yard container, which is one of the more popular containers, used to cost us about $900. That same container, a year later, we just bought some, they're $2,000. Just so they're just monster increases. Just carts alone, you know, a 35-gallon cart would cost us, you know, in the past about $32 to $35. That same cart now is $46 to almost $50. So we're just seeing that across the board on just about everything. And obviously, I mean, fuel, we transport all of trash up Curry County all the way to White City. So you have that, you know, increase on top of that as well.
Okay.
But we did, you know, during the last year, we, you know, with the labor market the way it was, we made a conscious decision to take care of our employees, realizing that everything was going up. We did implement in August of last year, we did a 10% increase on employee wages to help them out, help it, you know, combat the increase in costs. So we were able to keep people working through the last couple of years. We did emergency relief wages if someone were to get sick and were out for 2 weeks. We were still covering their wages and helping them out with their costs. So I don't know if that's, I don't have enough to give off the top of the cuff, like I said, to give the exact numbers, but those are kind of examples of some of the huge increases that we've seen.
Okay, well, I think that answers my question. Thank you very much, and thank you for what you do.
Counselor Madison.
I have no questions, ma'am, but ready to make a motion when appropriate.
Okay. Counselor Bradley?
Councilman McGilvery already answered, or already asked the question I would ask. The only thing I'd like to say to Mr. Pike is I use the Gold Beach site a lot, and your crew there is amazing and is really good customer service. So just put a little feather in their cap, so you know.
Yes, they certainly
I
deserve it.
appreciate that. I'll let, that's Pat Thunder out there most of the time, so very nice gentleman.
Okay. And Counselor Bergano?
I don't have anything, Mayor.
Okay. Then this is a public hearing, so Mr. Vieira, would you like to make a comment?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I believe it's Mr. Coker, would you like to make a comment?
Thank you very much, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank our CTR guys and gals for the fabulous job that they do. The other thing that I would comment on, if we have legitimate questions, as we should, about how much rate we should be paying this year over last year, I'm sure CTR can provide the financial background, the financial statements to let us understand that. And if that's publicly available, I would like to look at it. Not that I question it, but it's always good to have that anytime we make these kinds of choices. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pike, is that publicly available?
Can I just say
Yeah, I
something?
believe so. Just need to do a formal request, I think.
Okay. And Administrator Fritz?
Just, not that, I mean, certainly as a customer of CTR, anybody could probably try to request that information from the corporation, but I just, if you look at page 22 of your packet, those are the terms of our franchise agreement with CTR, and the cost of living adjustments that were built into the franchise agreement, it's very specific about how it can be figured. That's why they bring you the information about the CPI, because those are the terms of our agreement with them. So whether as a private customer you want to know what the financial status is or whatever, I'm sure you can probably request that, but that's not something that's in the terms of our finance, with our franchise agreement with them.
Thank you for pointing that out. And then I wanted to ask, and I wish I would have asked earlier, this is dated February 14th. When did we receive it?
It was right after I was doing the packet for March, because he originally had hoped it could be on the March agenda, but
Thank you.
that was the week,
Okay. That's fine.
that was the week I was gone.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Nothing. Okay, so in that, I will close the public hearing at 8:40. And I believe Councilor Madison wanted to make a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I motion that council adopt resolution R2211-10, a resolution approving Curry Transfer and Recycling rate adjustment and repealing resolution R2021-15, and any other resolutions that may be in conflict.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second?
Second by Councilor Bradley. Doubt anybody has a question, so I'm just going to go on to the question, and I will poll council. Councilor Skinner?
Aye.
Councilor McGilvery?
Aye.
Councilor Madison?
Aye.
Councilor Bradley?
Aye.
Councilor Pagano?
Aye.
Thank you. It has been approved, Mr. Pike.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Okay, and then we're going to go back to, is there any citizen comments? We've had a lot today. But anything in general that anybody wanted to give? I will start with Mr. Vieira.
I have nothing. Thank you for letting me participate in the housing discussion, though.
Appreciate your input. And Lynn Coker, anything general comments? You can have up to 3 minutes.
No, I don't have any more, but thank you very much for
Thank
letting me comment.
All right, thank you. And we will move on to number 6. And I was watching some commissioner meetings, and I noticed that there's a discussion about wind turbines, and I noticed that Pat Cox, who happens to be the manager of Port of Porterford and also the mayor of Porterford, and he had some comments, and so I asked him for that information, and he did send it to us, and that is in the packet. And I just thought that the council might want to know about it, in case you didn't. And I don't know if you have any comments or thoughts or suggestions, or if you want to learn any more. We can put it on a future agenda, or you can attend a county commission meeting, or watch the video, or any of those fun things. I know that historically our council has been very concerned about anything that happens in our ocean. Not like we get any choice over it, but So I will leave it up to anybody to say they want to say something.
Looking over the resolution for the Port Orford team, it's in our packet, page 31, that they are requesting the meeting with DLTD and BOEM, and it sounds like this whole process is at the beginning, and the leases aren't coming out for maybe 2 years, if I read that correctly. But I would love to see the city of Gold Beach have a seat at that table. As well, we don't have a fishing fleet going out here now. Something to consider.
Okay. What was one order? Counselor McGilvery?
No, I don't have anything right now.
Okay. Counselor Madison? You might have a lot of information on this.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this resolution is pretty much reiterating protection of their economy when it comes to the fishing industry, and I know that's been a topic of contention, and so I just hope that everybody's best interest is taken into consideration as they move forward on this project.
Thank you. Counselor Bradley?
No, as far as wind energy goes, I'm still in the learning phase, so I'm gonna keep comments to myself and just learn.
Counselor Begon?
I don't have anything there.
Okay. So if anybody wants it on a future agenda, just let us know. And if you learn something that we should know, let us know. Great. Next is the monthly ARPA ADU project.
Okay, and I have to apologize, as I was going through here, I got in the packet, they're out of order, and I apologize. The next thing after the wind turbine was the community garden, but that was not what was on the agenda. So I don't know if you want to go.
Oh, let's do community garden next because it's in order.
Okay, that starts on page 76.
And I do have an update on that. So is it okay if I interrupt?
Absolutely, I really, yeah.
I
go
keep
for it.
getting requests about the community garden. Why isn't the city doing anything about it? And it's never been a city project. It's always been a volunteer project. And so when Councilor Campbell left, I didn't have any counselor appointed to be the liaison for the community garden. So my first question is, would any of you like to do that? And then secondly, I bumped into Juvenile Director Lang at the bazaar, and she has a staff member that's interested in possibly having her juvenile clients do the garden. So my thought was, if nobody was interested, we'll plow it under. And so she said, no, let's not plow it under yet, and see if maybe they could pull it off. So my first question is, does anybody want to take that on as a liaison? And second, let's not talk about plowing it under this month. So does anybody want to volunteer?
I'd be curious into talking more with YA to see about it. I couldn't take that liaison on role right now, but it would be something I'd be curious on working with her, maybe when school's out in the summer.
Okay.
I know it's not Keen Garden planting time, but it's garden tending time.
And that's been the problem, is we get, volunteers will head it up, and then there's only one person that does the work, and so they eventually quit. And so that it becomes final. So, okay. Counselor Skinner, I annoy you.
Can't reach me through the computer.
Who says you have to be boring when you're in government?
Did I hear Nanny?
Okay, now we will do the ARPA ADU project.
Okay, yeah, and I apologize because I actually, normally I'm doing this like at 0:30, and this was actually done like.
It was done way too early in the day.
Yeah, it was actually, so I actually shouldn't have made a mistake, but okay.
Before you were exhausted.
Yeah, so, okay, so we just are keeping this on the agenda as just a monthly update of what's going on. And so, if you recall, in fact, they're still up there. And by the way, this is my grandson. What are you doing? Yeah, I was pretty proud of him. Got the S backwards on the one, but he got it on the other, so he's doing okay. Anyway, these were your choices, your ranking, and so what I did was I redid the graphic that I had put in there, and again, the reason why the second page is because I got it off the internet, so I have to give them credit, so. But I updated it, and then we're going to have a new staff member joining us this week, and it's a new position that is going to be 70% planning and then 30% admin, and it will help take a lot of the daily planning workload off of me specifically, but also we have a lot of work that's going to be tied to this money from the feds that we need another body to implement the good work that you guys have done. And so so that's where we're at there. So that's an exciting thing. And then the rest of that is just the prior reports on it.
Thank you. Any questions? Going once, going twice.
Will we be able to invite the new person to the next council meeting?
Yes, actually.
You'll know more in a few minutes.
Yeah, that person will be attending the next council meeting.
We already did the community, okay, scheduling the fiscal year 2022-23 budget hearings.
Okay, so this is on page 88 of your packet. Typically, we schedule 2 hearing dates. Usually we can get it done in one night, but it's always good to have a second just in case we need it. The soonest that I would be ready, and when I say I mean like as Jody the bookkeeper, the soonest that I could be ready would be the last week of this month, but then that's also the week before our regular council meeting, which is usually hell week for me already. So if you decide that week works better, if we could keep the May agenda light, that would help me out in that regard. Otherwise, the second week of May would be okay. Really, it's anytime after the third week in April, it's whatever works for you guys, because you guys all have day jobs. So it's as long, I know that we're not going to be able to hit on a date that all of us can be here, but if we can get a majority of us here. And I have the calendar. Which can't
Do
really.
we have a theater schedule that we have to think about?
I'm thinking hard. Ideation goes up in the middle of April and will run for 3 weeks. So I think the opens 15th, 16th, closes 30th.
And you're talking
And
April?
May, that's April.
Okay.
That's the show. I don't have anything to do with ideation, so I'm okay. But there's a show coming up in July that starts in rehearsal in May, so, and it's going to be heavy duty to get it on the boards by July and get it over with before there.
Would the week of the council meeting work for you?
Like I said, we can do it as long as we keep the May agenda light.
That ain't gonna happen. We're still working on the housing project, that's gonna be a good.
What about,
Right, but see, that's not work I have to do though. You know, that Matt does most of that. I'm just saying like, you know, things that I have to write reports for or do research or whatever. Matt's doing the heavy lifting there.
You notice she looks at me when she talks about the agenda.
Yeah, that's why, yeah. If we keep the agenda light, Mayor.
Okay, so.
The second week of May, I am out of town, taking my students to Salem, and then I have another commitment at the end of the week out of town, so I am only available on May 10th, that second week of May.
Anybody else available May
I am
10th? May 10th, how many people can make May 10th?
I'm talking to my boss.
What?
I can make it.
Your boss says yes.
May 10th?
Yeah, I
Valerie?
think I can do it.
Okay.
The week before would be awesome though too, since I am traveling 4 days of the week of May, of May 9th. But I could do May 10th or the week before.
Oh, the week before, okay, so that would
Okay,
be
let's try the week before then.
the 3rd or the 5th?
Well, why don't we put the 10th as the second one, so then
We could do the 10th of the second one. How about
Okay.
3, 4, 5? Can anybody do 3, 4, 5?
I think so.
Counselor Scanlon?
We're talking the same time frame, 6 or 7?
And
Usually we try to start a little bit early, just because it's a longer, but You're traveling back home from, what time do you usually get
I'm
back
home at
from work?
4:30.
Okay, we usually
I
start
think-
at 5:30, if
And
that
we make
works.
Jody feed us. If you come in person. Counselor Madison, I know you have a pretty crazy schedule.
Yeah, I'm looking, if we could avoid the 4th, that would be great.
Avoid the 5th?
Otherwise, I'm open.
Did you say avoid the 5th?
I'm sorry, the 4th.
The 4th. I saw the 4th.
Let me double check, I'm comparing work and personal.
So I'm guessing for you, the 5th.
The Fair Board has a meeting at 5 as well, so if we have to miss that, we can.
So I'm thinking the 5th would be better than the 3rd for you. So how about the
What's
5th and
the
the
Fair
10th?
Board
How many people can't do that?
Yeah, that's right.
Can do both.
Is the Fair Board meeting is the 4th? Is that what you guys had said?
Yes. The
Okay.
Fair Board meeting would be the Tuesday, would be the 3rd.
Okay, how does the 5th, Thursday the 5th at 5:30 look for everybody?
Okay, so we'll do the 5th as the first one, the 10th as a backup. So that means you have to have the thing to us 7 days before.
Yep.
Which is about the same time you do the packet, so you
That's-
don't want to do it early.
I will be, yeah, because, yeah.
Aren't they sweet? She's gonna
Was
stop.
that same 5:30 time on the 10th?
Does 5:30 work for everybody?
And we may not need the 10th, but we just like to schedule it just in case.
Sometimes you have new people that ask a lot of questions, and we have a very good budget committee. They ask a lot of questions. Our lay people, you'll be impressed, Counselor Skinner, you will.
Love a question.
You just have your 30 questions sitting there and just cross them off as they ask them all. Let's see, we got that done. I wanted to mention, I'm making a number 11 because I get to do that because I'm the boss. I'm the mayor, I have the gavel. I met with Counselors Bradley and Madison with the fire chief because there was a building that came available for sale, and he let us know that he was interested in possibly expanding the fire hall. And we had a quick meeting with Deanna Quimby with the USDA, and it took us like a few seconds to realize that cart is before the horse. So we're really not in a position to buy property or to develop that at this time. But that did lead into the discussion of possibly assisting with a fire district consolidation. And I spoke with our city attorney, and I thought it was kind of a simple process. He would write up a couple things, and then we would give it to them to use. And he said, it's really complicated. There's several different ways you can do it, and it really only works if it's a grassroots effort. So, and he said one of the things, like Florence joined the Siuslaw Fire District. And so they created one great big district instead of the city providing it. So it was kind of an interesting concept. So there's a lot of questions that have to be asked.
Who would we consolidate with?
So the theory is that the Central Curry districts would consolidate, and then they would contract with the city of Gold Beach to provide the service, similar to what Gold Beach Waterburn does now. And they've been talking about that for what, 4 years or something? So that's going to take a lot of leadership and talking with different groups. So anybody, I know Councilor Bradley's volunteered, that wants to be involved in that, we can start talking about what that's going to look like. So it's not going to be an overnight process, and it's not going to be ready for November.
No.
But we got to start somewhere. And as I told Chief Krieger, if you don't have a vision, it'll never happen. So you got to start somewhere, and that's the vision.
Well,
So,
I was reading his letters. and
so
he
I did
seems
want to
have
give you an
a different
update.
vision.
I want to make sure y'all know what is going on and what I've kind of been able to discover. And I so appreciate each and every one of you. And with that, we will start with Councilor comments and updates, starting with Councilor Madison.
Oh, thank you. I know that I have anything at this point, Mayor. I thank you for everything, and we've pretty much covered it at this meeting.
Okay. Councilor Bradley?
No? In regards to the fire department, I would encourage all the other counselors and any citizens listening to it who want to know the needs. Chief Krieger seems to be very well grounded. I do think it's a high need. I do think 3 of our most important jobs as counselors is provide, make sure our police force have what they need to do their job, make sure we've got toilets flushing, water flowing, and our fire department can do their job. And our chief is identifying some needs, and I would encourage everybody to talk to him about it, because I think those are the core tenets of what we're supposed to be doing. Everything else, well, important, that's the top of the cake.
And Councilor Regano, I'm going to skip you, and I'm going to go to Councilor Skinner.
I had a fire question come through with the ballot vote coming up. Did we see materials on that? I know I pay my water bill online, and I don't know if as a consumer I was supposed to look on the website to see more information. I know we had talked about at one meeting things going in the mailers.
Yeah,
We also talked about,
Oopsie.
no, it's just I need to finish it. I did talk to the attorney about what we can and can't do, and he said, yeah, we can't send some out in the thing, because then he said the Secretary of State has gotten more particular about if it seems like we're advocating a particular stance. And if we put it out there, we're supposed to just say, okay, this is what it is. If you have information, we'll give it to you. But if we mail something out, it's like we're trying to influence them, which, I mean,
We are.
yeah, we are. but we're not supposed to do that. So,
Okay.
but I do need to get you, Councilor Skinner, the elevator speech, so to speak. That
I think I have it. I think I have it in an earlier, in a set of materials that came when I first started. So I think I have that. Community, for me, I actually had 3. I heard that there's been discussions about dog parks every other year for eternity, but I had somebody ask me about dog parks. And I think with the density housing question we're having, that might be something to revisit in that. People are having apartments, and I know we have a lot of natural areas, but having something fenced for a puppy in training who's not there to run around off leash somewhere in the wilderness. The other was concern over Ziply fiber installation safety mechanism, safety procedures. Some people were concerned that they were seeing unsafe use of bucket trucks, bucket trucks moving with people in the bucket, and with not marking parked vehicles in the roadway. So I got them the information of how to comment to Ziply Fiber. And then the third was questions about the water shutoff and some confusion over what that might entail. But thank you. I referred them to the information that we had. And ironically, when I called to follow up, they were just entering their church building and trying to make coffee, and there was no water. So I'm like, yep, so the church is on Coffle Street, or whatever, how you say it. So those are my 3. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And Councilor McGilvery?
No, not too much. I just want to say that the county is actually going to have a real honest-to-gosh fair. It's going to be a lot of fun. We do have the carnival, we do have the midway, and those are the things that bring in the most money in a fair. There'll be some changes to the evening entertainments, because we won't be able to have the big trucks, but there will be things anyway that will keep people coming to the fair, and I think it's going to be different this year. So people are working real hard on it. And other than that, theater is busy with Bird Dogs right now. Show coming up in April, ideation, this summer show, spring show that was scheduled has to be postponed because of health issues of the director. And we may be putting up something else in its place. We're working on Christmas. We're going. So it should be it's going to be a good season. And other than that, I don't have anything else.
Thank you. I wanted to mention in my report, I of course went over the awarenesses, alcohol awareness and child abuse awareness and Fair Housing Month, Autism Awareness Month, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, Stress Awareness Month, which are all applicable to everything we do. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about some people have said, when are you going to have live meetings again? And, in-person meetings and public meetings, and interpreting that what we're doing is not public, and it is public, and it has been public, and we haven't had any problem until Councilor McGilvery couldn't get in today. But what I've learned through this last 2 years is that, I'm an extrovert, and I like meetings, and I come out of here with all kinds of energy, and it's wonderful, and then there's the other side of the coin where people are introverts, and I suck their energy away from them, and they've really flourished in this remote session. And so I want to appreciate and welcome this format forever. If that's what people prefer, I don't want to force them to come down here. And so if you feel more comfortable, meeting remotely, whether you're home or in Washington or, traveling somewhere, and I will never forget the night that Mayor Popoff apologized for having to have a remote meeting, and poor Councilor Madison was OHSU with her sister, and who was passing away, and I had to go to court in Eugene, and we were able to attend our meeting even though life got in our way. And so it is wonderful. We are required to do hybrid meetings now, so this will be available to everybody. And with that, we will have an executive session after this. It does not have to take a long time because it's mostly an idea, and you guys can decide if you want to continue or if you want to reschedule. But with that, I think I am going to let Councilor Pagano have the last word in this part of the meeting. And are you ready, sir?
I am. I'm the introvert that she's talking about, by the way.
One of them.
Sadly, this will be my last meeting. I am resigning as of tonight. I will be taking a new job that would be a conflict with me being a counselor. So this will be my last meeting. I appreciate everything you guys have all done, all the work you've put in. It's been a great 4 years almost. You guys are doing a great job. I hope you continue to go forward with the things that we have on the board, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys in a different capacity.
Thank you, Councilor Pagano. I almost want to cry. You have done a wonderful job over the last 3.5 years, and I've really appreciated working with you. And I think you're going to be great as a staff person. And I already asked your boss if you could continue to be part of our housing action team, and she said yes. So
Actually, it's going to be a requirement. Awesome. In case you haven't noticed, the staff member, and I didn't want to put it in the packet, but the staff member is going to be Mr. Pagano. And actually, the participating in the HAP stuff is actually a requirement of his job. So he will be participating.
So now that you're all in shock, does anybody want to say anything before I close this meeting and go into executive session?
I'm glad your new job makes you keep working with us.
I'm really excited to have Mr. Pagano start. I think it's he's got a lot of knowledge from prior jobs. He's got some expertise that I need in my office as far as planning goes. So I'm really excited, and the front office is excited to see you tomorrow.
Yay, me too.
Tomorrow? Okay, so I've got to say, when Councilor Pagano and I first ran, we weren't afraid to run by ourselves. And we decided if we were going to run together, and we barely had the courage to do that. And I just want to tell you how proud I am of you and how grateful I am that you're going to be with the city. That speaks volumes. You have incredible integrity and work ethic, and I'm just so excited. Like, I'm sad I'm going to miss you as a counselor, but I'm so grateful you'll be at the city. What a great addition.
Thank you. I feel that way too.
Thank you very, very much.
Anybody else?
No, I think it's going to be a great addition, especially since we keep getting on Administrator Fritz that we'd like to see her delegate more, so she doesn't always. I think this is a great way to have someone that you can delegate to and trust your work's going to get done.
And I just want everyone to know that, I talked to the mayor, before we did any of this, but actually the most important person that had to approve Mr. Pagano is my deputy Kim. Because if Kim was going to veto it, AJ, it wasn't going to happen. So Kim is excited to see you tomorrow.
No good.
Kim's made a good choice.
Yeah.
Come in with a mask and tell her she has to wear one, it'll be funny.
No, they were so, that was the April Fool's joke, so, yeah, so you should do it, because she'll, of course, she probably will throw something at you then, but.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, then, I need to read this before I adjourn, right?
No,
Adjourn
we
that
adjourned
meeting.
this meeting, so we need a
Okay,
motion
I'm
to
gonna-
adjourn this one.
Can I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Councilor Bradley adjourn,
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, all those in favor, we start with Councilor Skinner,
Aye.
Councilor McGilvery,
Aye.
Councilor Madison,
Aye.
Councilor Bradley,
Aye.
Councilor Burgon.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned at 9:09 PM, and I am